welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. Great to have you with us. Dave Revsine, happy to be joined by former Purdue star Rapheal Davis. This was an eventful weekend of Big Ten basketball. Lots going on.
Yeah, a lot of games, a lot of wins, but Purdue won a close one. Minnesota got a great one on the road. So the Big Ten is looking good right now.
No doubt. Let's start with Purdue. That is our big story. This is a team that obviously was playing as the #1 team in the country and trying to avoid losing 2 games in a week after ascending to that spot. They found themselves down 13 in the final 10 minutes before rallying to top NC State in overtime. Got 22 from Jaden Ivey, a dozen from Sasha Stefanovic. But Trevion Williams was really the big star. 22 points, 12 boards, 9 assists, an 82-72 Purdue win. And Rapheal, they showed great resilience, no doubt, in this game. But, man, the first 30 minutes were wholly uninspiring from where I was sitting. What's going on here? Why do you think that this team turned in a kind of so-so effort against Rutgers and then struggled for those first 30 minutes against NC State?
You become #1 in the country. You think you've made it sometimes. So Purdue, you can see against Rutgers, you can see how they came out yesterday against NC State. They didn't play as hard. They didn't play Purdue-branded basketball. Play hard, rebound, defend at a high level. It was more of outscore your man, per se. So they tried to approach it at the offensive end instead of going about it the defensive way. And those first 30 minutes, like you said, look, uninspired basketball, but it started with the defense. They were letting guys just get open, make shots. They weren't rotating. A lot of the times on defense, you have to start ahead of the play. So Purdue being lackadaisical, starting behind the play on down screens, behind the play on ball screens, not rotating right, it really hurt them in the first 30 minutes.
It just seems so uncharacteristic of this program. And, of course, you have a firsthand knowledge of it, having played for Coach Painter. And I always think of going to Mackey Arena and seeing the sign, defense lives here, right? I mean, that's kind of the core identity of the program. It did seem like in those last 10 minutes and certainly in the overtime, they kind of figured it out. How do you think it switched so dramatically?
Yeah, we were talking about it yesterday in the studio. They didn't change much. It's not like they went into a timeout and changed schemes or went away from something. They started to play hard. They played as hard as possible for those last 10 minutes going into overtime, and they got some success. But it started on the defensive end. You saw Jaden Ivey get a block that led into a dunk. That next possession, they got another stop, led into another dunk. So Purdue's way is playing defense into offense. It's not playing through your shooting. It's not playing through the turnovers. You got to get stops. Towards the end of the game, in those last 6 minutes, they got 3 stops in a row, which was huge for the defense to set the offense.
And frankly, the shooting hasn't been great. I mean, they're 12 of 47 from 3 in those 2 games. And early in the year, it seemed like they had kind of figured out the 3-point shooting. So we'll see. So that was a big part of it, the defense. And then Trevion Williams was just phenomenal. I mean, what can you even say about that performance? He was just so dominant. And again, it's one thing to score 22 points, but to have 9 assists, the blocks, the steals, just really incredibly versatile player. And we saw the complete arsenal. Right?
Oh, no, he really stepped up. It's almost as if he saw Andy Katz leave him out of top 5 players in the Big Ten. So yeah, Trevion really stepped up in a big way, but he did it with his energy. He did it with his leadership. You see him in a couple of timeouts, really getting his guys going. So he was a guy yesterday that didn't play through his offense. He played through the energy, played through the hustle. He got others involved, hitting skip passes, and it worked out for him. But on the defensive end, he was really good in that ball screen towards down the stretch, keeping Seabron out of the lane, which was huge for Purdue. If Trevion can get this type of production, especially off of the bench, he could be the first player of the year in the Big Ten to come off of the bench for an entire season. So to see your star and your senior lead that way down the stretch, lead in overtime, get guys going. I mean, Trevion trusted. Sasha hadn't made a 3. Trevion trusted Sasha to come off of a screen, hand him the ball right where he wanted it, and knock down a 3. So that's what you need from your leaders.
The way that Trevion Williams just kind of sublimated his ego and just said, I'm okay with that. You start Zach Edey. Of course, Zach Edey's a great player as well. But again, 22 points, 12 boards, 9 assists, 4 blocks, 2 steals. The first Division I player to hit all of those marks in a game in the last dozen years. I mean, again, just showing off the versatility. More from Rapheal coming up, but there is some other Big Ten news we want to get to. And maybe the biggest head turner so far this year has been Minnesota going to Michigan and winning 75-66 on Saturday. The first Big Ten win as a head coach for Ben Johnson. Jamison Battle at 27, 21 of them coming after the break. Gophers shot 64% in the second half to pull this one out. They are 8-1 now, 3 road wins over Power 5 teams. Some fascinating statistical anomalies in this one, including the fact Minnesota won with just 2 assists, ties for the fewest for a power conference team in a win in the last 10 years. Another Big Ten team, Wisconsin, did it against Stanford a few years ago. Now, the flip side is just 4 turnovers for the Gophers in that one. They've done an amazing job of taking care of the ball. First-year Gophers coach Ben Johnson is joining us now. It is time for our big interview. And Ben, let's start with that win against Michigan, and then we'll work our way backwards. But what did it mean to you to get a win on the road against a team as highly thought of as Michigan?
Oh, it was great for our program. It was great for what we're trying to do, great for our guys. You know, to see them, celebrate like they did and be proud of the work that they put in. We have tremendous amount of respect for not only Jawan, but for their program, for their team this year. And our guys just kind of, took to the moment. And they knew that it was a chance for us to kind of redeem ourselves. We played a really good Michigan State team that we didn't necessarily feel like we played at our best and didn't play our brand of basketball. And so guys were able to flip it and come out and get on the right side of the win column.
There were a lot of observers going into this year, Ben, who thought this team would finish last in the Big Ten. And so now I think the question going around in college basketball circles is, what in the world is going on here? So I ask you, what in the world is going on here? How has this happened?
You know, I think we just have a locker room full of guys that are committed to our culture, that are committed to each other, that came here for a reason. You know, all these guys, for the most part, minus Peyton and Eric, were guys I think want to prove that they can play at this level, and they should have been at this level from the beginning. And so it's kind of that healthy ego. And we're just worried about today. We're worried about trying to find a way to get better today. And we play a tough Corpus Christi team tomorrow and trying to find a way to play our best basketball and get another victory tomorrow. And just kind of live by that day-to-day mentality.
You mentioned a lot of guys trying to prove themselves. And for people who don't know a lot about how this roster is put together, you have a ton of transfers, which was by necessity. You essentially had virtually no one left in the program. But what I thought was interesting, and why I think a lot of people, when they assessed your roster, figured this was a team that would struggle to compete at this level, is everyone is either a mid-major transfer or in some cases a low-major transfer or even from lower levels of basketball. What made you believe that all of these guys could not just play at this level, but win at this level?
Yeah, I think the one thing that really stood out, we try to recruit the total person, obviously, and we rather, get to know who you are. And I think the one thing that stood out with our guys is they all kind of had that same makeup. And you watch on film and the way they moved, the way they played, the different universities and colleges that they came from, we knew that they had been taught the game really well. They had played from really good coaches. They all had won to a certain level. They all had talent that we felt fit our culture and our team and how we wanted to play. But then when you get to know them, you know that they're made about the right stuff, that they're going to compete every single day, that they do have that chip on their shoulder, that they want to be here. And all that stuff to me is important. And you look at a guy like, E.J. Stevens, who's been unbelievable for us, had a really good game versus Michigan. E.J. didn't even start the majority of his games at Lafayette. And so now it's like you got a guy that is second team all-league, is coming off the bench and is good with that because he's got one thing in mind. He just wants to win. Luke Lowy, all he wants to do is compete at the highest level and win. Peyton Willis wanted to come back and finish his career at a place that he really felt was special, and he wanted to do it on his terms, and he wanted to do it winning. Eric Curry wanted to come back because he wanted to end it right in front of our fans and win. Jamison Battle wanted to come home and compete in front of fans and family, but he also wanted to win. A guy that averaged 17 in the A-10. So the mentality was the right one, and I knew that when you bring in a bunch of pieces, it's got to work. And to me, the only way it works is if they're about the one thing, and that's team. And I get individual goals are important, and I want our guys to have that. And all that will come if we just consume ourselves with trying to, play winning basketball and make winning plays.
I want to get into some of those individuals that you mentioned. I think Jamison Battle's an amazing story. You've known him for a long time. He played at your high school, obviously. For those who don't know, you're from Minneapolis. You played at Minnesota and were a team captain. Battle decides to transfer back, was a really good player, as you said, at GW. but now he is the top dog on a Big Ten team. How big a jump is that for someone to go from, again, a good, very well-respected mid-major league to be a good player there, but to come into maybe the best high major league in the country and to be a number one option?
Yeah, without a doubt, it's a jump. And you never know. We've all dealt with the portal. We've all dealt with transfers. And you look at the numbers and you say, okay, what could translate? Most kids that make the jump, they're double-figure scorers, or maybe they're double-double players, or they do something that's elite wherever they're from. And you just always wonder, okay, is that going to translate? The one thing when you look at Jamison, he's always been able to shoot and score the basketball. I think that translates. I don't care what level you're at. When you're skilled and you can make shots, that's going to translate. Now, did we know it'd be to this degree this early? No one knew that. But at the same time, when you see people every day and you see his work ethic and the amount of time he's put in the gym, how he's changed his body, his will, the way he competes every single practice, the juice he brings, the energy he brings, you don't put a cap or a ceiling on those people. And when you put them in an environment where they can excel, that's positive, that's motivating, that pushes him to try to be his best every single day and never be satisfied. If you have competitive people, I think sky can be the limit, and that's what Jamison is.
You mentioned Eric Curry as well, and he is just an amazing story. He is a sixth-year player. He's missed 2 full seasons because of injuries and has really never been able to become the player that people thought he might be coming out of high school. He was set, I know, to essentially be a graduate assistant coach, and then in midsummer basically said, I want to give this one more shot. And now here he is, Ben. He is starting for you. He started every game. He is a key contributor. He has helped you win games. Give people a sense of what he's been through and what this means to him.
He's been awesome. Obviously for me, he was huge because he was somebody I could lean on and the players could lean on because he knew me. I recruited him. I coached him here for a year. So he could kind of tell the guys early, like, hey, this is what coach is like. Or, he could back me up and what I was saying was the truth. Or here's what you can expect from him every single day. So he was really able to help with our buy-in. But then also, he's a very talented player. And, what he's been able to do with his body to be in shape, to get himself to a point where he's able to play, 28 to 32 minutes a game and impact winning, all credit goes to Eric and just his mentality of who he is as a person. He does a lot of things that don't always show up in the box score, but we wouldn't be where we are without Eric. I had a great game point-wise versus Michigan State, but, conversely, I thought he was arguably our most valuable player versus Michigan and what he did versus Hunter Dickinson, who's one of the elite, big men in the country. That doesn't always show up in the scoreboard, like I said. He's kind of the heart and soul. He's the guy that's been here the longest. He embodies what we want our program to stand on and be, and just can't be more excited for a guy to be able to end it on his terms the right way and to go out on top. And it's our job every single day to come to work so that, we continue this and continue the path for Eric and the rest of our seniors.
You mentioned how much he plays, and you could say that about just about everyone who starts for you. There is no team in the country that is getting fewer minutes off of its bench than you guys are right now. And I know that isn't in any way to shortchange the contributions those players are making. It's just the reality of those starters are spending a lot of time on the floor. How does that impact the way that you play?
It does a little bit. I think our other guys, our new guys in our program, it does a really good job of, in practice the last month, earning their way. And we get it. We have to develop our bench. That's been our plan all along. We got to continue growth. We got to be able to get multiple guys in there and be able to be a total team. So we'll work to do that every single day. And we got to be smart with what we do. Be smart with the minutes and the load that we put on guys. But right now I think we're in a pretty good rhythm. Guys kind of know where they fit. But then again, in order to continue this and to get to where we want to go, we got to keep developing our team, and that includes developing our bench.
Where do you want to go?
We want to keep this thing going. We try not to look too far ahead. It's easy to say, hard to do. But that's something we've embodied as a team and as a program just worry about today. How are we going to have a really good practice today? How are we going to be able to compete against a really good Corpus Christi team tomorrow? And just worry about the now. I think if you worry about the details right now and you're consumed with, the right things and you're consumed with competing, the long term kind of takes care of itself. But if you slip up on the details, you try to look too far ahead, I think that's when you have slippage. So we're going to keep trying to ride this wave, but it starts with worrying about today.
One last thing I want to ask you. I think the composition of your staff is really interesting. You got Dave Thorson on your staff, who was your high school coach. And we have seen this in the Big Ten, interestingly, right? Chris Collins did the same thing with Brian James, who was his high school coach. What is that like, that flip of that dynamic? Someone who was your coach and you are now their boss.
Yeah, no, it's definitely unique. It's something that if you would have told me when I was in high school that this guy that was coaching me up and getting on me and leading me eventually would be, working with me on the staff, I'd have said you're crazy. But it's worked out, and he's a big part of what we do, unbelievable at what he does, and that's why I hired him. It's a bonus that I've known him. It's a bonus that he's worked at the university before. It's a bonus that he's a Hall of Fame high school coach in the state of Minnesota. But I hired him because of the type of coach that he is and the leader that he is, and he understands how to mold young men and how to coach and teach the game. And so, just like all my staff, we do a great job of trying to push each other every day, and iron sharpens iron, and just try to stay the course. And like I said, he's a big part of what we do, and to be able to do this job every single day with people that you enjoy being around is just another bonus.
Ben Johnson, congratulations on a really good start to this point. It has been a ton of fun to follow this team. As you said, Texas A&M Corpus Christi tomorrow night right here on the Big Ten Network. We will look forward to that. Thanks for your time, Ben.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Well, welcome back to Big Ten Today. Great to have you with us, and very pleased to be joined by Andy Staples of The Athletic, one-time Big Ten Network contributor. Great to have you back on the show, Andy, back in the old Big Ten football and beyond days, a long time ago.
Oh, yeah, me and DiNardo just going at it over should Tyrann Mathieu win the Heisman Trophy? I think I may have been right on that, although I don't even think I voted him number one on my ballot that year. But I spent most of that season arguing for it, and now I feel bad that I didn't actually have him number one because I probably was right.
Well, he certainly was. He's a heck of a player, no doubt about it. A heck of a player on the defensive end this year, too, in Aiden Hutchinson of Michigan. Ended up finishing second to Bryce Young in the Heisman, which, of course, came out this weekend. Was this simply a matter, in your opinion, of Bryce Young being the only guy who made sense offensively, and it just kind of by default went to him? And it's not to take away from his season. He had a remarkable year, certainly had an incredible game against Georgia. But was it just a function of voters not being ready to give it to a defensive player, whether it's Will Anderson or Aiden Hutchinson or one of those guys?
I just think there's not enough voters who know enough about football to actually watch a game critically. I think they breathed a sigh of relief, the majority of the electorate, when Bryce Young had that big game in the SEC championship. And finally, there's a quarterback we can vote for. Well, it doesn't need to be that way. You could actually watch a game and watch something other than the ball and figure out what's going on, because Bryce Young is not the best player on his own team. Will Anderson is the best player on Alabama. So if you're going to vote an Alabama player number one because it's the nation's most outstanding player, then probably should be Tuscaloosa County's most outstanding player too, not the second best player in Tuscaloosa County. So that was the part that bugged me. I had Will Anderson number one, Aiden Hutchinson number two. I had Bryce Young number three on my ballot. And I just think there's so many voters who are like, well, it's got to be a quarterback or running back because I don't understand how to quantify it any other way. Well, did you watch the Michigan-Ohio State game? Did you watch Aiden Hutchinson almost single-handedly dismantle Ohio State's offense? Like, you can quantify it by that. I mean, if you watched Alabama all season, you saw Will Anderson carrying that defense. I mean, without him, they may lose to Arkansas. They may lose to Auburn. They may lose to Florida. So those things are I thought were pretty readily apparent. I mean, especially Anderson's stat line. We hadn't seen a guy put up those kind of numbers from an edge rusher position in years. So I don't know. I was very encouraged by some of the straw polls late in the season because it looked like people were more willing to look at the game a little more critically. But then you saw the final total, and it's just like, okay, they're going to vote for a quarterback if they can because they don't want to watch anything other than the ball.
It's interesting. It would have been fascinating to see what would have happened if the Georgia-Alabama game had gone kind of according to the script and Georgia had come in and put together a dominant defensive performance, and then where would the electorate have turned? Obviously, we'll never know the answer to that. I do want to talk about Hutchinson and kind of this Michigan revival here, which I know caught the nation off guard to a certain extent. I think it caught people in the Big Ten off guard, too. Give us a sense of how you feel like they match up against Georgia.
I feel like this is the meme of two Spider-Mans pointing at one another. I really do. Right down to, Cade McNamara and Stetson Bennett feel similar as quarterbacks where they weren't asked to do a ton, but handled it very capably when they were. And when they get in a situation against a really good defense, now you saw that with Bennett against Alabama a little bit, but you're going to see it again against Michigan's defense. And then you're going to see it for McNamara against Georgia's defense. They're going to be placed in a situation where they're going to have to make some plays to win the game. And so I think those two, and it's funny because I just spent 2 minutes yelling about how it's not all about the quarterbacks, but in this game, it might be which quarterback can be more dynamic because both teams are going to try to run the ball a lot. Both teams are going to rely on that defense to carry them through, to give them some good field position situations. So which quarterback can it? Now, you saw it with McNamara, though, in the Big Ten championship game. Iowa's not a defense that gives up a lot of big plays, but that long pass down the sideline, I realized the other one was a run, but it's possible. And then they'll throw McCarthy in there. Obviously, McCarthy was in at QB on that run and threw one hell of a lead block 50 yards down the field. So that part's interesting to me, too, is when they put McCarthy in, because I think back to that Michigan State game, and he had a beautiful touchdown pass, but he also had a play where they messed up an exchange. And you say, okay, well, are you sure you want to put him in these high-stakes moments when McNamara is your guy most of the time? But it does seem to be working for them. So I'll be curious to see how they deal with that. And then, can Ojabo and Hutchinson get after Stetson Bennett? Because if they can, I think that really limits what Georgia can do. And you saw it against Alabama. I mean, Alabama was getting pressure on Georgia in ways that Georgia had not allowed pressure much of the season. And it kept Georgia from just mushing Alabama, because that's what Georgia does to teams is they'll pound them and pound them and pound, and they'll throw a little bit. They'll throw to Brock Bowers. George Pickens should be healthier, so that gives them a little more of a downfield threat. But they like to hurt you, and they like to just body blow, so that by the third quarter, they're running right through you. And I don't know that Michigan is the kind of team you can do that to.
Yeah, I would agree. No, I think it's going to be fascinating. I do think the quarterback battle is really interesting, and particularly if Stetson Bennett doesn't play well. I mean, do you go to JT Daniels? I mean, there's a lot of pressure on Kirby Smart in this game. I feel like the pressure is squarely on Georgia's side, yes, and much less so on Harbaugh. There are a few other topics I want to talk to you about, stuff that you've written about that I find really interesting. One of them is, hey, it's signing day this week, and I know you spent a lot of time early in your career covering recruiting, and you wrote a really great article about quarterback recruiting and how there are so many fewer high school quarterbacks now who are getting high-level FBS offers because of the portal. Because now you can say, if we need help at the quarterback position, let's get it right away. Let's find a transfer who can come in and help us. Give people a sense of how the portal has changed the dynamic, not just for quarterbacks, but overall here in terms of how programs are filling out their rosters.
Well, it looks like for QBs, particularly this season, that it's going to be about a third fewer than signed 5 years ago out of high school. Wow. With FBS schools. And what that – now, part of that is because of super seniors and the COVID year, and there's extra folks in the transfer portal with experience. That's one piece of it. Or teams just have more players on their roster currently and they're not taking more on. But another piece of it is coaches are saying, I can take this experienced guy – who's using that new rule where they get one free transfer as an undergrad, and he can't leave once he gets to me. If I sign the kid out of high school, he can just leave. And so they like the idea of the person getting there and basically having to be there till they graduate, and it feels like they have a little more control, a little more leverage, that sort of thing, which is really what a lot of this stuff is about. But I had a coach text me, an assistant coach on a team, and I said, what's it going to take for you guys to sign a high school quarterback this year? And he texted back, has to be all world, basically. And this was not a perennial top 5 program. This was a pretty good program, but not a great one. And that's what these guys are up against. That's what they're dealing with now. So what you may see is quarterbacks having to go to the FCS level or Division II and then play their way up. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. You're going to see those guys will blow up young at that level, and they'll get called up. And that may be how things go from now on.
Yeah. Some unintended consequences, for sure. And again, I think very few people aren't in favor of seeing players be able to move wherever they want to move. But certainly there is a trickle-down effect with everything. I want to ask you about the college football playoff and expansion. There were meetings, as we know, in Dallas a couple weeks ago. It feels like there is still an impasse here. On one hand, it seems like there is agreement that people want more teams in the playoffs and that all of the commissioners you would talk to would say, yes, we agree on that. The issue is how many and how do you get there? 2024 has been this target date, Andy, for trying to get this done. And it felt like this summer we were headed there. And then, of course, everything blew up with Oklahoma and Texas heading to the SEC and teams leagues, I should say, starting to rethink what all this would mean and what the implications are. Where are we right now in this? And is 2024 still realistic?
It's still a possibility, but it fades by the day. And actually, 2023 was possible when all this started, but they blew past that date. And it may be that they just wait till the contract ends, which would be after the 2025 season, going into 2026, and they can just start anew. But I think there's still a lot of push, and not just from the people who put the plan together, because you do see that from Greg Sankey of the SEC, Bob Bowlesby of the Big 12, Craig Thompson, Mountain West, Jack Swarbrick of Notre Dame. Those are the subcommittee that put it together. They're on board, clearly, with the thing they put together. But you also hear from George Kliavkoff of the Pac-12. Kevin Warren even said this as well, but not in as gung-ho of a way, that 2024 is still out there. Kliavkoff, who, God bless him, I love him because he's new. And so he doesn't have the same rules as everybody else. And he said it last week when we were talking to him. He's like, there's a lot of money on the table. You sure you want to leave those 2 years sitting on the table? And so I think that is ultimately what might inspire them to come to a resolution here in the next month or so, would be that the fact that a 12-team playoff, and I do think it's going to be 12. I know there's some support for 8, but the problem is the SEC won't support 8 unless it's best 8, and it's not going to be best 8 because the other leagues won't support that. So it's going to be 12. And part of the reason it's going to be 12 is there's a heck of a lot more money in 12. There's another round to sell to television partners. So I think they've gotten through most of the bigger picture issues. The one that seems to be the sticking point is who gets an automatic bid. And it's either the 5 conferences that we currently know as the Power 5 plus the highest ranked Group of 5 champion, or the top 6 ranked champions, which is what that plan they put out said. What I thought was interesting was Bob Bowlesby, the Big 12. He's a guy whose league would benefit quite a bit from that 5+1 plan, where the champions of the Power 5 get an automatic bid, because his league's in flux when Texas and Oklahoma leave. Is there a Power 5 anymore? Is that even a concept? Well, if you codify that concept, then yeah, it's a concept, and that's one of the leagues. But he doesn't like the idea of codifying it, because he said, look, the BCS folks got dragged before Congress. If you codify it like that, we are going to get dragged before Congress. We might get sued. I don't want to mess with that. He's like, my league's going to get in with the top 6 champs anyway, so I'm not worried about that. Meanwhile, Kevin Warren says, okay, if we're always going to get in, and let's be honest, the Big Ten would always get in that scenario, why not just give it to us? And it's not a bad argument either way. So I'm not exactly sure if they're just going to do rock, paper, scissors on this thing, because it feels like the sides are fairly dug in, but what they're arguing over is just not that big of a thing.
Yeah, it does feel like a little bit of a margin play, but again, it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. As you say, there does seem to be incredible momentum for getting this done and certainly expanding it. And again, the issue becomes how many television partners and all these different factors, which are really important. But I think to college football fans, you feel like, hey, just give me a bigger playoff. That's what I want.
Just tell me when it starts and how many teams are going to be in it. That's all I care about.
What time I ought to turn on the TV. Andy, great stuff as always. We miss your green room presence, my friend, but continue all the great work, and super to read you on The Athletic and listen to the pod and hear you on the radio. You're all over the place. Good to see you.
Thank you so much, Dave.
All right, take care, man. The volleyball Final Four is set. Fully half the field from the Big Ten. Wisconsin in for the third straight year. They swept Minnesota. Will face the top seed undefeated Louisville Thursday in Columbus. Nebraska into the Final Four for the 16th time, the 5th in the last 7 seasons. They upset the 2 seed Texas. They will take on Pitt, which beat Purdue to advance. As promised, Emily Ehman is here. Before we look ahead to the semis, I want to really quickly put a bow on the Elite Eight. And let's start with Wisconsin. And you had Dana Rettke and Sydney Hilly. They decided to come back, right, to take this extra COVID year. They get to play in front of their hometown fans there at the field house. What did it mean for this team to advance and get to another Final Four?
Well, yeah, like you said, you had players like Sydney Hilly, Dana Rettke, a few others in that group that came back to win a national championship. So they are so hungry for it. And I think you can see that throughout the tournament. They haven't lost a set the entire time headed to the Final Four. So this team has been so dominant from the beginning, and it means everything to do that on their home court against their rival. You know, it's a big border battle game. So that was so cool for all those fifth-year seniors.
Yeah, no doubt. And it wraps up a fabulous career for Stephanie Samity as well, who also came back to try to make it to a Final Four. And, of course, 2-time Big Ten Player of the Year. She was just outstanding. What about Nebraska? I mean, Texas is the 2 seed, and yet a lot of people have felt like this is the best team in the country. For Nebraska to beat them with as much youth as they have, well, what do you make of the Huskers?
Yeah, I think headed into this one, like you said, a lot of people would have given Texas the edge here. They were so physical all season long. But I think what stood out for Nebraska was their youth. You know, they had their freshmen really step up. Allie Batenhorst, Lindsey Krause combined for 28 kills, hit over 400. When you have freshmen, I remember talking to John Cook early in the season. He said, a lot of times you kind of hope you don't have to play your freshmen. But these freshmen, they can play, and they're stepping up at such a crucial time, peaking at the right time. And they just overpowered Texas, the second team in the country. I mean, overpowered them, outplayed them from start to finish. It was so impressive. Probably the best match I've seen Nebraska play all season long.
Lowest seeded team to make the Final Four in 7 years. And so now here we are with these Final Four matchups, Wisconsin and Louisville. Louisville's undefeated. What does Wisconsin need to do? You say they played so well. What do they need to do to end that run?
Yeah, so for Louisville, I mean, they really depend on their front court defense and their offense. So that front court for them is so good. They put up a big block. They're the second blocking team in the entire country. But Wisconsin, another really physical team. You have someone like Dana Rettke up front, up there, 6'8" middle blocker. And if they can get around them, hit around that big block, stay balanced in their offense, and then keep Louisville out of system. They have one of the best setters in the country. And when she's in the pocket, she is really good. So you get them out of system, hit around that big block, and stay balanced, and you should be good if you're Wisconsin.
First Final Four for Louisville, and you do wonder whether the moment gets a little bit too big when you consider how experienced Wisconsin is. What about Nebraska and Pitt? What do the Huskers need to do here?
Yeah, well, if you saw that Pitt-Purdue match, you saw that Pitt's offense is just so dominant. So what Purdue needs to, or what Nebraska needs to do, they got to get some block touches. That was something that Purdue struggled with a little bit, playing them in that Elite Eight. They got to get those block touches. They have to get them out of system, put in good Nebraska serves. Their serve and pass game is so solid. If they can put in good serves, they should be in a good spot. And then finally, they got to slow down Pitt's pins. Kayla Lund, Lekator Member, Monet, two of the best pins in the nation, kind of had a field day against the Boilermakers, so they got to slow down those pins, put up a pretty good block, and then serve tough, and they should be in a good spot.
Should be fascinating to watch. It's in Columbus on Thursday. Again, it's like an ACC Big Ten challenge. You got 2 ACC,
might as well be
2 Big Ten. Should be a ton of fun. Emily, thanks for your insight. Really appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow.